Alright, me. So, it is a cold and dark November. But today I read Suddenly Murder by Lauren Muñoz. I believe, more correctly, this is Lauren Muñoz's first publication. And it's fantastically well done, right? It is a mystery, so at some point I'll touch on those parts. But right, there's a couple main things that really stuck out to me just kind of generally about the book, before we get into the actual story itself, is that one of the big focuses early on is kind of setting up this whole idea of what it means to belong inside a certain area, right? The way it's set up is that our main character that we're reading through, Izzy, Isadora Morales, is going to a very prestigious private high school, and the reason that she's able to go there is because she's on scholarship, because her mom is a teacher there, right? And so, right, she has a complete understanding, or complete feeling, I should say, is that she doesn't feel like she belongs at the school, right? Which inherently makes sense, right? She's surrounded by people that are, worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? And, she's there, and although she has friends there, right, her clothes are slightly more faded, right? Her, people know her as the teacher's kid, right? And so, right, she doesn't always belong or always fit in with everybody. And it's a very good reminder of that, right? Because I think it's very easy to, when you talk about education or just talk about the world in general, to imagine that if we all just had the same thing, we wouldn't have problems anymore in that instance, right? Or if we all, right, especially with education and looking at like private institutions or with like charter schools, or even just like inherently very strict dress codes, right, is that if we all have the same thing, we all look the same, well then there shouldn't be any social discrimination, which is absolutely not true, right? Students, especially high school students, are ruthless when it comes to it. They will find anything they can to create groups, right? And so Isadora, although she has, right, on the outside of things, right, should belong, right, is that she perceives, as do the other students, that she doesn't, right? And then we get this kind of pop up again later on, when they first get to the mansion, right? So the way the story works out is that they all go to this very private mansion that's on an island for a week. It's right after their graduation, their high school graduation, and there's going to be a whole bunch of them, 7 of them initially, 6 after one of them gets killed. They're staying there for the week, right? And it's not just them, there's also a few staff members that are around, right? And when we first kind of meet them and meet those staff members, this is where we really get that talk of what does it mean to belong, right? Of where Isadora probably relates to these people more, and she says that she kind of does, right? But she can't, right? Because that's not what's expected of her in that moment, right? And in fact, she's given explicit directions by her best friend, Cassidy, to, right, not interact with the staff at all unless it was absolutely necessary, to pretend like they weren't there, right? Which I think is, for the lay person, for the common person, right? That's a very weird way to look at, what does it mean to be served on by someone. But for the rich and for the people they're trying to impersonate, right? Because they're trying to impersonate as if they were rich 1920s, jazz age people, it's assumed to be normal, which, is a very interesting concept, a very interesting way to look at groups and social dynamics. So that's that. Other important thing that I think this book really touches on is, what does it mean to be loyal, right? We have Cassidy, who is incredibly loyal, right? Is that she does everything for everyone, but at the same time, it really seems like she's doing it for herself because she's a people pleaser. But then also, right, is that she doesn't let relationships form naturally, right? She's very focused on, picking someone and then deciding what your relationship with them is going to be like, right? And so, although she's incredibly loyal, right, it feels like a very forced loyalty that she then puts herself into, right? Versus a very natural kind of approach to things, right? A whole bunch of the story revolves around disloyalty, right? Of cheating and whatnot. But then it comes back again when we go back to Izzy, right? Of Izzy's loyalty. What does it mean to be loyal to your family when you know that they've done something wrong, right? This is the part where I have to start talking about the spoiler alerts and all that jazz. Because as we find out at the very end of the book, is that the secret that Izzy has been hiding this entire time has not been her own affair with the person that's been cheating. It's actually been that her mom, the school teacher, has been seeing someone that is a high school student that was 17 at the time, is now 18, right? And so we run into the situation, what does it mean to be loyal, right? Izzy has a younger sister that needs specialized care, right? And so even though she loves the sister, right, her mom no longer being there means that she has to be the sole caretaker of her younger sister, right? Which means that she has to give up everything else, right? But also, how do you approach that situation in the first place, right? Where this person that has been providing for you and caring for you and has given you opportunities, when they do something that is aggressively wrong, how do you approach that situation, right? And we get this actually a lot through it. There's when we do the flashbacks, we'll talk about in a second, a lot of those have to do with what does it mean to be loyal to friends and family and things like that, right? So I would say that's arguably the bigger theme that goes throughout it is what does it mean to be loyal? The book itself, right? It's set up in basically two different timelines, and two different styles of writing, which I found really interesting. All the way back to Stain My Hands Red, Paint My Body Red, maybe. God, what's that? It's Charlotte Woodvote's book. I don't remember the name of it. I'm sorry, Shardy. But one of the big things that is what I talked about in that is that we have the switching of perspectives of like current time versus past time. And now this book does the same thing, in which we'll get 2 or 3 chapters of present time, what's happening as the investigation's unfolding. And then we'll flip back a little bit to, what happened 3 weeks ago, or 3 months ago, or 9 months ago, right? When all this, it really kind of started happening, actually, right? And the seeds for everything that's happening kind of unfolded. It's also a little bit jarring because your present day ones are spoken in first person through Isidora's perspective, right? And then we get to the ones from the past, right, the flashbacks, and they're spoken in a third person point of view, which is, it's great, right? It makes sense for what's happening. But the first switch, we go from Isidora's specific perspective to then a third person point of view of a story about Izzy, right? And so that first one's a little bit jarring, but right, it's a very interesting way to kind of approach it, right? Of course, the mystery genre in general, it's, I think, hard to innovate because things have been done so much and there's a very clear outline of what you need to do with it. But I think it was a very, very interesting take on what to do. And then the second thing that the book does that really kind of lets it actually be like a really nice surprise is that it misleads you at two different points, right? Of where, because of the background that we have, right? The person who gets murdered is Blaine, who is Cassidy's boyfriend, right? Blaine has a long history of cheating, right? And then because of Cassidy's whole thing, which is about loyalty, right? Where she just expects it and understands what she wants and therefore willing to forgive anything that goes against that. Well, he's just been a continuous cheater throughout the entire time, right? And so, you know, we're leading throughout the entire book expecting that this is going to be the big cause, right? Because what also gets kind of implied throughout is that our main character, Isadora, is having some sort of issue where she doesn't want to come completely forward about something that's happening, right? Of where there's some sort of history that she doesn't want out because it's going to implicate her as the main suspect, right? And so the entire time, right, is that she's subverting and subverting and subverting, and it's being made to look out like what she's subverting is that she had a relationship with Blaine at some point, right? What we actually find out, but we don't find out until the very end, is that what she's actually subverting is that Blaine had a relationship with her mom, who is a teacher, right? Who was a teacher at the school. That's what she's been subverting the entire time, right? Because, right, it goes back to this whole loyalty thing, right? They start a relationship when the mom was a teacher and Blaine was 17 at the time, right? Which makes it on the parent, right? It makes it on the teacher, right? In that instance, right? And so, right, by letting that get out in some way, right, it destroys Izzy's future without her choice. It destroys her mom's future. And then Blaine, the guy who's a serial cheater and is doing consistently bad things throughout his entire life, gets off scot-free, right? Even though he's the one that seduces the teacher, right? Which is not, I'm not saying that it is only his fault. I'm just stating in the way that the book is kind of viewed through, right? That as an adult that is taking advantage of a situation that's also on the adult. I need to put that out there. But we find out that that's the actual secret that Isadora's been hiding the entire time. And so, like, we get that one big switch, right? Of like, oh, that's a very different, we now see Isadora in a very different light, because the entire time with it being viewed as she was another person that helped Blaine cheat, especially on her best friend, right? Is that's a whole, right? That's makes you the bad person versus something out of your control, but you happen to be related to it in some way, but it's out of your control. So that's that. The second subversion comes from the prologue, right? It's told from Izzy's point of view, right? Or at least I believe it is told from Izzy's point of view because it is described in first person, right? What we're kind of led to believe throughout the entire time, because from Izzy's perspective, is that the cause of death was a whole bunch of stab wounds to the back caused by Izzy's pen, right? We later learned that Izzy didn't actually do the killing, but she put the pen in the room with the note, right? It's saying that she would harm him if he were to let the story get out that Blaine and Izzy's mom were having a relationship. So that's right. But in the prologue, we just hear and understand that Izzy has gone into the room, she's holding the knife, and it says that she clears the threshold, right? What's this intended to imply is that she crosses the threshold into the bathroom to then murder him, right? What we later find out is that she crosses the threshold in order to put the knife into a pocket, right? But we don't know that until the very end, right? And so it's a very, very nice way to subvert, right? Because throughout the entire time, we're thinking that we're reading this from the perspective of someone who's trying to get away with it, when in reality, what we've actually found is that we're reading from the perspective of someone who is who is racked with guilt, because if they had not planted the knife there, then Blaine would not have been killed, right? It's two different versions of grief, right? So, congratulations to Lauren Muñoz for that subversion, right? Because it's a very strong one, I think, right? It's, as I mentioned, it's, right, the mystery genre has tropes that you have to follow, right? And so, by hitting those while also giving us something new to experience, something that's actually, I would argue, is very, very hard to do. But yeah, that is, I think that's all my thoughts. Yes. That's all my thoughts on Suddenly a Murder by Lauren Muñoz. And that's that.